And we're back. You're listening to the Talking Boxing with Billy C show. You're watching us on the Fight Now television channel. And if you don't have Fight Now on your sports channel lineup, you need to call your local television provider and tell them that you want Fight Now right now. That's right. Pick up the phone and call them. For all information about the channel, you can find it on their website, www.fightnow.com. And speaking of now.
Goes down. Flashing right hand. The champ is down. Walcott gets in with a left hook that floors Marciano.
Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Thomas trying to hold on. Serious trouble. And must be the greatest.
Joining us from Sin City, my favorite place, great weather and all that stuff, from the Boxing Hall of Fame in Las Vegas. It's time for In the Ring with Billy C. and Steve Lott. And speaking of Steve Lott, he joins us right now. What's up, Steve?
Hey, Billy. Just remember, what happens in Las Vegas stays in Vegas.
That's what I was hoping when I went out there. I was hoping, since we were happening out there, that we were going to get to stay. But I guess it means for everything other than me, you know. So anyway, hey, listen.
Respect.
Yeah, I know. I'm the Rodney Dangerfield of boxing, you know. But last time we got together, we had a great discussion, and I kind of wanted to pick up where we left off. One of the things we were talking about, aside from Floyd Mayweather Jr. being considered a throwback fighter compared to some of the greats, was headbutts. And there was something that we both noticed, that virtually there was no headbutts thrown, at least caused, and I'm talking about unintentional headbutts. Back in the old days, there seems to be a lot more today. What's your take on that? Why do you think that there were more headbutts today, that there are more headbutts today than there were in yesteryear?
Well, you know, the headbutt is such a haphazard thing to happen. As we mentioned, in the history of boxing on film, the fighters we can see, the Jack Johnson, Jack Dempsey, Marciano, Robinson, there were very few headbutts in those fights. Now, we have not seen fights that did not take place. On the undercards, maybe that was different, but I don't think so. Perhaps the fighters back then spent so much time in the gym and so many fights that they had the experience of knowing how not to take a headbutt, how to keep their head from out of the danger zone. Today, it's the same thing. There are some fighters that really don't have the experience, but it's still very haphazard. If the fighters move their head a bit more on the inside, perhaps we wouldn't see as many headbutts, but very few of the fighters move their head on the inside.
Well, you know, a thing that I noticed is fighters from the past are more fluid when they deliver their punches, and you know, whether it's a single punch or, in this case, a multi-punch combination. And today's fighters seem to lunge at their opponents. Now, I know we've discussed the lack of teachers in terms of trainers. Do you think that might have play a big part of it, or the other part of the coin that I was going to throw at you was the refereeing? I think that the jobs that the referees do today are not that great. And to give a good example, this past weekend we had a referee that actually let the two fighters fight close inside, and there was no headbutts. You know, it was like they didn't have to lunge back to where they left off. Do you think either of those two instances play a role in why we see more headbutts today?
Well, it's possible that because in the old days, from the teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, the fighters were a bit more proficient because they had so much time in the gyms that they did not lunge. They did not have to lunge. They were in range of the opponent most of the time. They did move their head a bit. They did slip some punches, so they did not have to lunge. The fighters today, because they're not taught to move their head as they get close, over and over, as they tried to get in close, they got hit. They got hit again. And mentally, they placed a switch in their brain that says, I'm going to stay on the outside, and I'm not going to take any punches until it becomes absolutely mandatory for me to attack. The referees, well, that's a tough call. You know, some referees, I think today, because of the safety factor, there's such a spotlight on boxing and safety in boxing that they're probably advised or instructed by the organizations to make sure that there's not much fighting in the inside or they break them too quickly. In the old days, that would never happen, and There was no instructions given to the referee of how to keep the fight going in any way. And the fighters fought 10, 20, 30 rounds with no problem. So the headbutt is still a very haphazard thing.
You know, I think another thing, I didn't mean to get on a kicking the referee, but while he's down, we might as well kick him a few times, because my thought is, you know, back in the day, every single old film I've watched of a previous fighter, you know, previous era, you know, very rarely do you see the referee. I mean, you know who they are, you've seen them, you see the same faces and stuff. But the referee is literally the third guy in the ring that you don't see. And today, when we don't see these refs, we think he's doing a good job. I think today's referee has a tendency to make it more about themselves. They're coining phrases, they're coining styles, they're doing this. I mean, you know, it's like they're camera hogs. Do you think that has something to do with it?
Well, there again, it depends on the fighters. In the, of course, in the years going by, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, the fighters did not hold that much. There was very little holding. They were punching inside. They were waiting for an opening. Today, because the fighters have not been taught how to fight inside, then they grab it a bit more. That means that the referees are kind of in the frame of mind saying, I better stay close because these guys are about to grab. They're almost programmed to know that the fighters are going to grab. So if a referee permits the fighters to fight too long, you know, he knows that either one or two things are going to happen. The commission will mention something about that if they hold too long, or the audience will start booing because they're very interested now in seeing action and not holding. So it's still a tough job for the referee.
I don't know. You're being too kind on him, to tell you the truth. But, you know, the era of film, you know, we keep talking about that. And the era of film was important, obviously, in the sport of boxing. You know, the one thing that we had discussed the last time that you were here, the last time that you were on, and we were talking about it. The thing I wanted to ask was, you know, the whole issue of being a great fighter, the whole issue of being a great fighter. We get to use film to gauge this, and I know we discussed this last time, you know, and it still kind of is hanging around in my thoughts. You know, is it really fair to throw out the fighters that we don't have film on? I know it's hard to go by someone else's write-up and someone else's opinion, especially with a sport that's so subjective. But has it come to that the only fighters that we can really evaluate are the ones that we can watch on film?
Well, there's two facets of that. Number one, we cannot really evaluate them because there's no way to see how they fought. We can determine that they were great by who they fought and how they beat them, or I should say, if they beat them, and their records, their longevity. So, you know, there's no really way to tell if a fighter that's never been filmed in 1920 or 1930, if he could beat someone of today. All we know is that he was great at his time, but there's really no way to compare.
You know, it's like that with any sport, though. I mean, today's NFL football player is bigger, faster, stronger than, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So, I mean, it's relative. But in boxing, we seem to have a tendency to always have these dream matchups. And, you know, we talk about some of these great fighters that there's virtually no film, if any film. You know, the Harry Grebs, the Jack Brittons, you know, fighters of this nature, the early Sugar Ray Robinson fights that, you know, people say he was the greatest welterweight ever, yet there's no film of it. You know, I mean, what do we do in these cases?
Well, it's the same thing in football and basketball and baseball. There are some players that we've never seen, but I think that makes the sport of boxing more theatrical, more legendary, that there are fighters that have never been seen, and hopefully their legend will stay in the minds of the young audience today, the young fight fans, and make them wonder, what would this guy have done? Look at his record, 350 fights, not a frame of film, yet he beat a Gene Tunney, or there's a Jack Britton that no film exists. Maybe he would have beaten Jose Napoles. It adds a bit of mystery. It adds a bit of show business to boxing.
I got a question about film. Obviously, it's right up your alley, and I'm curious to know what your answer is. You know, in boxing, there is a lot of, even though there's a lot of non-existing film. There is a lot of film footage of many, many fights. The problem is getting people to be able to see them. Do you think that it would be advantageous? I know this might be a trick question, especially for you, but do you think it would be advantageous to offer those films to fans as some type of a collection or an era by era or something like that, so they could watch those films in the comfort of their own home rather than a bootlegged YouTube clip or something like that?
Yes, for the time being, the YouTube is the way to go. Although they're very short clips, and the quality that is very bad. The quality is very bad. They're generation after generation away from the original material. In the near future, we will be releasing these great legendary fights in digital form, and they've been made directly from the 35 millimeter films, the negatives that were in the camera the night of the fight or the day of the fight. So they will be available in the future, yes.
Oh, that'd be great. Now, is that something that you're going to offer through your Hall of Fame, or is this going to be something separate? Or you got the juices flowing here. Give me another little tidbit on that.
They will be produced by the Boxing Hall of Fame, and they'll be sold, available at the site at the Luxor Hotel, and more easily on the website www.boxinghalloffame.com. So they will be available in the near future in digital form.
Oh, cool. Is the website up?
Yes, the website is up. It's being developed now. We've got some wonderful things on it. Because of the massive amount of graphics and photos and video that have to be transferred to digital form, we're in our infancy right now, but it's starting to look really good.
Oh, good. You gotta send me links and stuff and some like an image or whatever, and we'll put a link up there for you.
Right. Well, the thing is that the unique things we have, of course, are the exclusive rights to the $100 million ESPN Classic Sports Film Library. That's Dempsey, Lewis, Marshall, Ali Tyson. And also, we've acquired the exclusive rights to the early Mike Tyson photographs and images for licensing and production. That's a deal that Bill Caton made many years ago with Mike Tyson. So there'll be a lot of stuff that's exclusive and available only through the Boxing Hall of Fame. Oh,
that's great stuff, man. Great stuff. You got to keep me in the loop on that, man. Definitely.
I will.
One last thing. We were talking last time about Floyd Mayweather Jr. As a throwback fighter, and I was shocked to hear that, in your opinion, you thought he kind of was because of his approach and his seriousness to kind of stay in shape all year round. However, in terms of a throwback fighter, the way I look at it, with the frequency of fighting and the part about wanting to fight the best, to prove you're the best, that's something I feel he's lacking. What's your thoughts?
Well, there's two facets of that. He is incredibly talented athletically. He may not be the very best skilled fighter, the most proficient technical fighter of all time, but his athletic ability is sensational, and of course he is the champion. The decision whether to take the fights that he should be taking, we don't know if he's making that decision or his manager. In the history of boxing, it's almost exclusively that the manager would decide who the fighter fights and when he fights. It'd be very rare that a fighter was given the role of deciding that. In this case, because of his stature in the world, I don't know whether or not he's making the decision or his manager's making the decision. I don't think it's a will I win, will I lose decision. I think it's a business decision. But that's something we don't know who's calling the shots on his side.
The business end of boxing, a lot of people like myself, old timers in the sport, so to speak, it's kind of ruined. Even though it's always been there and it's always had the same flavor it has today, maybe not presented in the same way, but it's always been there. But the business of boxing seems to have, ruined the points that you and I make about the lack of teachers, the lack of good refereeing, the attitude of the fighter. Do you ever see it coming back, Steve? I mean, is the boxing game forever changed? Is it going to get worse? Could it get better? I mean, what's your thoughts?
There again is a couple of categories. Number one, in the white American market, it's going to be very difficult to rejuvenate a mainstream audience for boxing, unless a kid like new Bumbo Mancini or a young Rocky Marciano comes along to excite the audience. That's going to be rare. In the black market, in the African American market, unless you get a Mayweather again, it's going to be exceedingly rare to generate interest. The one audience that is big and getting bigger and will become huge is the Hispanic audience, the Latin audience. That audience really loves boxing. And because of their affection for boxing, they're going to stick and stay with the fights on ESPN and HBO and Showtime because many, many, many of them are Hispanic fighters. So the future of boxing, while it's not going to be mainstream in the United States or perhaps even in the world with white audiences or African American audiences, the Hispanic audience will keep it in a very high level.
You know, the other thing too, though, Steve, is the economy. I mean, if you go back in the history of the sport, during all the golden eras, so to speak, of boxing, you know, the economy was at its worst. You know, I mean, and that seems to be happening again today. Worldwide, the economy is in the toilet. And we're seeing a resurgence of boxing over the last couple of years, especially in the countries that, you know, poverty levels are even higher. I mean, you look over, you know, in the Ukraine and on that part of the world, you know, boxing is very popular. And like you said, the Hispanic viewers are big time. Do you think that plays a role in it?
Well, obviously, yes. In foreign countries, because perhaps the main population of available talent are smaller fighters. They cannot play baseball, football, basketball, so they're going to go into boxing. There's a golden light at the end of the tunnel for those type of people and those guys. Here in the United States, interestingly enough, the economy is taking an interesting facet in boxing also because many of the public schools, many of the junior high schools and high schools cannot afford athletic programs anymore. The uniforms, the fields, all of the talent involved, all of the coaching involved. And what's happening is in many of the cities, especially in California, the gyms, the boxing gyms, because the money it takes to join is very little, there's a resurgence in the amount of young talent heading to those gyms. So in a weird way, the economy may be playing a role in bringing back more talent into the gyms.
Right, that's a breath of fresh air right there. That's good. And you know, as soon as you mentioned that, I thought you were going to go down another path and mention the collegiate level because that's something that's clearly resurgent. It was something I hadn't heard about collegiate boxing in forever, really, until the last couple of years. I mean, even Mike Lee, who is a light heavyweight, who's on all those Subway commercials. You know, he was from Notre Dame, and you know, I'm starting to get press releases on tournaments from college against college. So you know, even on the collegiate level, it's starting to become a little more popular.
Well, you know, in the many years gone by, 20s, 30s, 40s, every major college, every college, university had a team. And I have programs, Yale versus Princeton boxing, Harvard versus Dartmouth boxing. Of course, that's waned because of the safety factor. The schools just do not want to take the risk of anything that's happening between two guys in the gym. In small gyms where the kids are going to because there's no programs of football, baseball, basketball in high schools, in the gym, the parent just signs a waiver, the kid goes in there and boxes, and it's very simple. Hopefully, the schools will pick up on that and permit more boxing. That would be great for the mainstream audience.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I happen to like that. I think that's good. And I think that the what you hit really you hit it on the head. You know, as long as the pool of fighters increases, the better off we'll be. It really in the long run, right? Well,
all you need is one kid of all the gyms in the country. One kid. Probably he'd have to be a white kid, because that would really attract the mainstream audience. All you need is one kid from Oklahoma or Texas or North Dakota from a gym that comes out. He's 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". For whatever reason, he didn't want to play football, basketball, baseball. He had accessibility to a boxing gym. He loved boxing. He saw Mike Tyson fight. He saw Sugar Ray Robinson fight. He saw Duran fight. He said, I want to be a fighter. Of the thousands and thousands of kids out there, all we need is one to really set the boxing world ablaze again.
Come on, Steve. You're asking for a big white heavyweight from Texas or Oklahoma to save boxing. Come on, man. You might as well have an Italian in the White House. I mean, give me a break. That's everybody wants to see that, but they don't exist. Big good white fighters, do they?
Well, they exist, but they're not boxing. They're playing football, basketball, baseball.
Right.
And that's the shocking thing is that in the last, I think we mentioned this last time, in the last 20, 30 years, not one kid who is incredibly talented, a big kid, in junior high school, 6'4", 6'5", 220, not one of those kids has gone into boxing in a very serious way. He could have been a baseball, football, basketball player easily because of his athletic ability, but not one. That's the type of fighter that would quickly generate tremendous interest, like an 18-year-old Tyson did 25 years ago. Yes, there could be a lightweight from Chicago who comes out, a young Bumbo Mancini, and he would be exciting to watch and be wonderful. But to bring boxing back quickly among the mainstream audience, for the HBO, Showtime executives to sit up and say, holy mackerel, we better jump on this kid now, that would take a white heavyweight who's spectacular. Not just good, but spectacular.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a black heavyweight right now, young kid, that pretty much goes against the grain. He's not very big. And, I'm sure he's, got the business people behind him and everything now. But he also doesn't appear to be, mapping out a career and cherry picking opponents and stuff like that. His name is Bryant Jennings. He's out of the Philly area, and he's small, but very exciting. I wish that more fighters would fight like him. He's actually into fighting, tough fights and being matched up tough, just like the old fighters used to be. And that's something I think we're lacking right off the bat because of the business end.
Well, do you know, what is his record? I'm not familiar with his record. How many fights has he had?
I believe he's about 16-0 right now, maybe 17-0. He doesn't have 20 fights. He may only have 15 at this point, but he busted onto the scene. As a matter of fact, he's going to be on the NBC Sports Network again in a couple of weeks. His name is Bryant Jennings. Check him out.
I'll check him out. Yeah, it would have been great if his manager started sending out news releases from his very first fight.
Yeah, well, that seems to be one of the big problems, Steve, is that a lot of fighters today, or I should say, a lot of promoters today, don't really promote their fighters. So you get a young kid that has some promise, and one of the big things that you notice right away is that they're not being promoted. You get a kid that busts onto the scene and gets a following or whatever. One of the things that you notice right away is that they are not promoted. And you're right, a guy like Bryant Jennings, his management should have been promoting him right after his first fight.
Yes, they should have been sending digital photographs, which is much easier today than it was 30 years ago with actually shooting a photo and sending a hard copy. Digital photos, sending files, video files to BBC, ITV, CNN, ESPN, all over the place, so that by the time he had his 8th fight or 9th fight, he would have been a household name to many of the people in the boxing world, maybe even mainstream.
Yeah, well then, network television had a lot to do with that, just like Tyson. Tyson got to perform on network television and reached a lot more homes and stuff like that, as he was coming up, and people jumped onto that bandwagon, which they don't do anymore. They nowadays, it's all for titles, it's all on cable, and you're only watching a few fights.
Well, the first Tyson fight on TV on network wasn't until the Ferguson fight. That was his 18th pro fight. So the early fights were all shot by Caton and Jacobs. They were paid for by Caton and Jacobs, photographers at ringside shooting photographs, because they knew they had to promote the fighter independently until he got to where he could be on network television. That takes money. That takes funds. I don't know whether or not this Mr. Jennings has managers who have the resources to do something like that. But that has to be done independently of television, independently of the promoters, because that's what's best for the fighter.
Great point, Steve. And I think that is one of the biggest things we're lacking in the sport of boxing today, promoters and managers that are willing to open up their checkbook. And I've been saying that for a long time, and you make a great point about Mike Tyson and his team that was behind him. They saw the potential, and they were willing to invest in that, and that's something that has become extinct. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with the sport today. But
yes, I agree.
Yeah, it's a shame. But, hey, I'm real excited about your Boxing Hall of Fame in Las Vegas. I look forward to coming out there real soon, and I look forward to our next segment, brother.
Thank you so much, Billy. Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
All right, man. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
That's Steve Lott from the Boxing Hall of Fame in Las Vegas, and we're doing our little segment here. We are going to break it apart and not only have it on the Talking Boxing with Billy C show, but it will be available separately. It's called In the Ring with Billy C and Steve Lott. Look for that. You can check it out on the website, www.billycboxing.com, and there is a section for it on the left-hand side of the screen where it says In the Ring. So if you missed an episode, or you just want to listen to a previous episode or this episode by itself, check it out, www.billycboxing.com, and it's on the In the Ring section. Hey, I got to take a break. I'll be right back.